Hello everyone, my name is Gerson and this is Woke Wednesdays. I am very excited to be here. Today we are talking about very important topics. We're talking about ideas such as democracy. We're talking about politics. But we want to be nuanced. What do these things actually mean, particularly in relation to the upcoming election? And to have this conversation, we have two phenomenal, wonderful guests, my professors at Florida International University. They're also responsible for me graduating or not, so we're gonna see how this goes. Would you like to introduce yourselves, your name, and a little bit about your research?
So my name is Benjamin Baez. I go by Ben. I am a professor of higher education at Florida International University. I have been researching, I guess my research is associated with how we come to know things. How is it that we know something? And so that's it. Thank you for having me here.
Great, and I'm Dan Saunders. I'm an associate professor of higher education. When I did write, I wrote about neoliberalism and particularly neoliberal ideology in higher education, but mainly I've been doing now a lot of union work. I was the president of the United Faculty of Florida's FIU chapter. Now I'm the chief negotiator for us. So most of my time is spent with that.
I was also the president of the United Faculty of Florida at one point in my life.
Well, thank y'all so much for being here. I'm very excited, honored, and humbled to have y'all here today. So lately, well, it seems like, I don't know, with social media, the ideas of politics have been just everywhere, like especially since Trump's election, just on social media in particular. A lot of people have become more like involved or interested in the idea of politics, but sometimes I hear people say, no, let's not talk about politics. So what I'm trying to think through, and I think this is what our conversation is today, just kind of thinking through, what does politics mean? If we can just start there. What is politics? So thoughts, opinions?
I think when people are talking about I'm tired of politics, I think they're tired of election-related processes and concerns, which is a form of politics. I think to me, what is political is that you are doing an action that is affecting someone else. And politics is the mechanisms and the way you get that to happen. So the political is the effect on someone, and politics is the processes, concerns, interests, arguments that you make to affect what you want to do. And so there's a lot of politics. There's politics associated with election and presidential candidates and our governments. But there's also a politics associated with how we distribute resources, how we distribute in what forms of ways that our citizens are going to try to affect the actions of others, and such as through protests and through civil disobedience and things like that. So I see politics as the mechanisms and practices associated with the political, meaning that the political is to get someone to, you're doing something that affects someone's lives.
In a deliberate way? Do you think there's an intentionality that needs to be behind all politics? Because many of the things that affect our lives do so through these commonsensical, maybe less than visible ways. And I think the idea of, politics aside, first we all should have a break, but I wonder how this kind of intentionality around political action might be a more narrow understanding of politics than an idea of what might impact.
So it is intentional for me. You are trying to affect something in someone's life. You're trying to do something beyond yourself. And so it is intentional. Whether you understand it that way or not is a question of politics.
Well, and I think that might be why we oftentimes in the United States conflate voting with politics, because it is one of the few deliberate acts that we engage in within a governmental, not in the Foucaultian sense, but within kind of the government in a direct way.
So we were talking about a little bit before we started about sports. So some people have said, why can't it just be football? Or why can't it just be basketball? Why do you have to involve politics in it? Why can't we just have the sport politics aside? So you think when people are saying that, what do you think people are trying to get at when they say something like that?
Your politics aside, not politics aside.
I think
I don't want to listen to what you have to say about this.
I don't like your argument, so I don't want to hear it.
or the argument that I'm going to anticipate you're making. Because if we want to take politics out of sports, then have the sports teams give us back our tax dollars.
If you want to take politics out of sports, you wouldn't have sports.
Yeah.
Because sports is a political decision.
Even your being is politicized, right? The way you are deemed as a man or a woman, as white or black, these are political.
Right. Let's talk about sports. If I don't play sports. I don't. Despite my physique, I am not a sports person. But I would say if I am going to play soccer with you in the backyard, that is not a political decision. That is a decision that is a decision that is individual. It's a family-oriented decision, whatever. When I am using tax dollars, when I am using physical space and I have other people coming, now I'm engaging in a political act. So sports by nature is political. It's the politics is how that happens, how we get a sports team, what decisions we make about what the players can say. Those are all political. So when I hear let's get politics out, I'm hearing I don't like your argument and I don't want to hear it. That's what I hear.
Yeah. I think so. Athletes are people other than just their athletic folks, and I think now that professional athletes and college athletes, like amateur athletes, have a more direct conduit to people through social media, we're seeing some different political performances.
Yeah.
It used to be kind of heralded through a conversation with the local news reporter. If you're a college athlete, you didn't talk directly to reporters. Everything was kind of managed through more of an institutional apparatus. Now, when we have athletes that are in real time tweeting or posting on Instagram when their coach wears a shirt, I'm thinking of Oklahoma State football coach who wore a shirt that was offensive to star running back. Star running back says, "Here, this is what I think." That was unthinkable in its publicness, but I'm sure those conversations have always happened in locker rooms.
It's opening up a space to kind of enter the political realm in a different way.
Yo, that was wild. One of my favorite lines was, if you want to take politics out of sports, then you wouldn't have sports. So let's do a quick little recap. Real quick. Politics. It's about the things and the various things, I guess, that affect us and the way it shapes our behaviors in our everyday lives. That is politics, or a type of politics. Politics can also be about who you're voting for, which you should definitely vote and be informed if you can, hopefully so. But there are many forms that politics takes, and in this particular part of the conversation, we're talking about politics and sports. So the different ways that we ourselves are affected by sports is political, or the way we also play a role in affecting other players in different sports is also political. So I don't know about y'all, but have you ever thought about the role that your tax dollars, sorry, English is my second language, so sometimes I get a little bit mixed up. But have you ever thought about the role that tax dollars play in your own city and the way that goes into building infrastructures, which includes stadiums? Well, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it until my professors brought it up, but that's an important thing. That is political. Another thing is, I'll give you a good example, I guess. In 2005, the NBA actually started requiring that players wear business casual attire. They were trying to ban the idea of baggy jeans because they didn't want to give a particular look. To me, I would consider that political, because they were saying what people can and cannot do. They were literally taking or implementing or imposing, and I guess we could say, the way people are supposed to conduct themselves. So I guess that's what I think political is. At least that's what I took from our conversation in that particular moment. But check out what my professors say next about actors.
We hear a similar argument around celebrities and movie stars and rock stars, music stars, celebrities. And there's also this argument, keep your politics out of it. But think about that, because we don't object if they're in a movie that we all consider to relate to the political, right? So because they're acting. But when they are using their stardom and their celebrity to promote a particular stance, the question becomes, is that stance something we like or we don't? We question it when we don't like it. Otherwise, it doesn't. If someone is saying something I believe in, I don't even hear it. It just becomes part of the way that my thinking is shared by somebody else. I only hear it I only get a deeply emotional response when I hear something that I disagree with. And all of a sudden, now I see that as politics.
And maybe because in the NFL, where many people in the United States are hearing things they disagree with from athletes in ways that they hadn't heard before. So maybe the idea of like, let's get politics out of this or politics aside is in response to hearing things differently.
Right.
So, speaking about politics, another conversation that I've heard lately is this the juxtaposition of socialism and democracy. This has been a big debate. So, let's talk a little bit about democracy. What does that mean? I've heard people say we're losing democracy. We have to vote democracy back in. I've heard just democracy is just everywhere right now. What does democracy mean?
I mean, you've written about this quite a bit, so you want to...
I think everybody's written about it, whether they know it or not. I see democracy as the political science definition of democracy is ruled by the people. The people rule themselves. What we have in most governments, in most nations, are republics or not, right? So it obviously, there's no way when you have billions of people on the earth for everybody to rule themselves. So there's a sense in which we use the authority to rule ourselves, and we somehow frame it into a republic situation, which is that we vote for our representatives. We say, you're going to vote and make a decision on my behalf. And if I don't like it, the next come around, I'm going to get you out. So that is republicanism. And that is what is under crisis, I think, right now. Because we never had true democracy. That's just not possible. It's possible in very localized situations, but it is not possible at the level of a nation state. So we're really, what is in crisis right now is republicanism. The idea that we can't get to vote for the people that will affect our lives. That is what is in crisis.
Well, and who constitutes the we? So in Florida, where we as people that live here, passed some laws that enabled the people who previously weren't able to vote to be able to vote. Long overdue, and immediately the governor's state legislature undermines that. So even the we voting within a kind of republic has always been a very partial and select group.
So what's in crisis is that we won't be able to get those people out. And that is what's in crisis, because the idea of republicanism presupposes also that the people that you pick to represent you are going to do bad things. And the idea is that the next go around, I'm going to vote them out. What's in crisis is our inability to do that. For whatever reason, there are some reasons that are related, that are structural to the way those legislatures prevent us from actually exercising our right to vote, but also through the way that we're socialized to think that some things don't matter, or that we can't affect change or anything like that. So that is what I see as in crisis. The ability of our inability to get people out that we don't believe is actually are acting in our interests. Yes.
Yo, so I understand that, and I get the concept that I am the host of Woke Wednesdays, but if I'm being completely honest with y'all, I was low-key confused when my professors were talking about that. Yes, I'm a PhD candidate, but my professors continue to take me to school. I was learning along with y'all. So let me try to think through and try, I guess, to react to what they were saying. So let's draw some distinctions, first of all. So there is a difference between being a Democrat and being a Republican. Quickly, that just refers to a party affiliation. So someone can identify as a Democrat or as a Republican or as an independent or whatever else. We should not confuse that with democracy. So a Democrat is different from democracy. Democracy refers to the rule of the people. It is an idea, it is a political ideology, it is a theory. So it just means that it is the rule of the people. So we could say that we live in a democracy in a certain way. But what my professor was saying was that to actually live in a democracy is actually very difficult. It's almost impossible to really do unless you're in a very small, localized space, a place where the people can actually rule. Now, let's talk about republicanism or a republic. That should not be confused with being a Republican. I know there's a lot of words are being thrown at us, which is why I was kind of confused. But republicanism or a republic, this means that we vote somebody in or vote somebody out. So the argument that was made here by my professor was that what is actually in crisis is republicanism, our inability to vote somebody out because we don't agree with what they are doing. And this can happen in numerous ways. There are numerous obstacles that inhibit us from necessarily or from participating in these kind of formal political actions, such as voting. So let's say your job doesn't allow you to take the day off so you can go vote on voting day. That is one of the obstacles that exists that inhibits our potential or our ability to participate. So just a quick recap: democracy means the rule of the people. Republicanism or a republic means that we are able to vote people in or vote people out. That's what a republic means, which should not be confused with party affiliations, such as being a Democrat or identifying as a Democrat or identifying as a Republican. I hope that helps because I had to look that stuff up. So let's see what comes up next with my professors.
So one thing that I've also seen is, because I'm a millennial, I get most of my news from Instagram and Facebook and social media. Another thing that I'm seeing as well is that there's a big group of people that for them, democracy is nationalism. So this idea of the flag and what that means, what that represents. I've never seen such a, at least in my lifetime, such a group of people be so committed to almost an abstraction. That to them, democracy is the United States. These are synonyms almost. And with that comes a type of nationalism. I don't know if you've seen this, if I don't know.
Well, I think it's definitely not new. Of
course not, yeah.
The idea of spreading freedom, anything that the United States does is necessarily pro-democracy, is just laughable once you take any sort of historical look around these sorts of things. But I think we care about freedom everywhere but at work. So I always think about how if we cared about democracy, shouldn't we care about it when we're working? Why is it that that's the only place that we can go and it's okay to be told what to do, when to do, what to wear, how to eat, how to dress, how to act? So the distinction between socialism and democracy, getting back to your initial point, it's like one tries to kind of obfuscate the economic aspects that are kind of put aside, and the other allegedly tries to engage with those. But I think, and we've talked about this idea of the state of exception within democratic spaces, and Ben, I don't know if you can maybe give a quick overview of that, because I feel like that could be kind of a founding or foundational idea with some of this stuff.
Before that, I want to say that I don't see democracy and nationalism as opposed. Democracy is ruled by the people. They could rule themselves into a particular authoritarian situation. I see nationalism as the idea that your country, your state, is the true state, and that everybody else is either lies or subservient or unequal, a threat in a lot of situations. And so nationalists tend to be very isolationist, and they tend to be to constantly express their authority over others. But in order to do that, they also have to get out the imperfections in their nation state. And so
this is some scary language.
This is we saw not too long, like in the 1930s and 40s in Germany. This is to me the example par excellence of what we're talking about with nationalism. And so that you then get out the imperfections because you believe that if anybody has intermingled with someone from another country you consider inferior, you have to weed that out. So nationalism tend to also is a highly racialized, highly oppressive and suppressive kind of regimes. So there is a sense in which white nationalism is actually exposing what we really mean by nationalism. But it could also be in other countries where they might be more fundamentalist around religion. It could be something else. But in the United States, it tends to be a very racialized regime. So that's what I mean. But the state of exception in political theory is that regardless of whether you have a legislature or a lawmaking body, the real sovereign, the real king, the real authority is the person that can suspend the law. If you can suspend the law, then you are above the law. That is the idea of the state of exception. And so generally during war times, like an actual war, usually the leader of the country gets to suspend civil liberties and gets to suspend the law. And that means that is the real sovereign, that is the real leader, the real authority in a particular space. In the United States, certainly because the United States is a country constantly in a war of some kind, either with other nations or even within the war on poverty, war on terrorism. It's a perpetual war that the state of exception has been increasingly being it's being coalesced around the president. The president seems to be the person that can suspend the law, and if that's the case, then that the president is an important position in this country. The legislature can remove that authority from the president, but right now, if it's framed in a war, then it becomes an impossibility to do that.
And both major parties have supported the president having and
this
using.
This is not a Republican Democratic thing. This is not a communist socialist thing. It's just who can suspend the law, and in what ways do they use that authority and that power?
So speaking of,
which means that the Republicanism is under crisis because we believe that the people are the sovereign, and therefore the Republicanism is what's under.
We're recording? Yeah, bro. Shit, dude, I'm still trying to catch my breath because that was heavy. That was heavy. We're talking about some serious things, so I'm just trying to catch my breath. Yeah, so let's try to think through this. So nationalism is basically an exclusionary idea. It is an idea that we are the one true sovereign nation. We are the spreaders of freedom, and anything or anyone outside of that is a potential threat. And in order to deal with that threat, you can actually become quite violent. You can actually go to war with people, with countries, kill babies, kill the innocent. So if we tie that to the state of exception, if I understood it, the state of exception is the ability to suspend the law, and that person which could suspend the law is above the law. In this case, it could be the president of the United States. So if the president believes that there is a threat to the nation state, they can suspend the law and in turn implement things such as a wall, or they can push for ICE camps where women right now are being violated, children are being violated, men are being violated, children are in cages, there are forced hysterectomies in ICE camps that we know. So tying the state of exception to nationalism is actually a very horrible and dangerous thing. And at least that's the way I understood it. I would love to hear what y'all think, what y'all's opinions are. Can you give us maybe different examples in the comments about what you think a state of exception is or could be, or different manifestations of it? Like I said, I'm still trying to catch my breath because that was a whole lot. But let's check out what we say next, because now we're going to tie these ideas, or try to tie these ideas, to the upcoming election. So stay tuned.
and I want to follow up on the emphasis, or the way we emphasize as a country, the position of the president, because we do have an upcoming election. Some people have said it's the most important election ever in the history of the United States. So what are your thoughts when you hear stuff like that about the importance of this particular election as it relates to the presidency?
I think it is, not because it's Trump versus Joe Biden. That's not. It's because who do we believe is going to save our lives? And I think where it is a life and death situation. I think we have seen when we have current administration unable to deal with, sometimes refusal to deal with, the fact that more and more and more and more Americans are dying. 213,000 is what we know of. And so I think all health experts believe that it's considerably more than that. And we also don't know what the long-term impact of having gotten coronavirus will be on our lives and our children's lives. So it is, to me, I wasn't around during the World War I and World War II, so believe it or not.
I didn't want to see a joke, but yeah.
Yeah, believe it or not. I mean, I look like old as crap, but I'm not as old as that. I was a child during the sort of the Vietnam War, like kind of a little kid. So I don't know what that's like. I do remember other wars. First going into Iraq to get them out of to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. I do remember those, and but the fact is, I do believe this is probably in my lifetime, this is the most important election.
What do you think, Gerson?
Yeah, I think it's important in different ways depending on how you are, who you are, and your material condition, social relations. So I think completely agree with the fact that with everything that Ben said. I think for me it's also this election feels like it's a mirror in ways that previous elections hadn't felt. Like, is this really who we are? I hear a lot of this, from Massachusetts, from being a professor within these circles, that people in my kind of intimate connections haven't been put in cages on the borders, haven't been abused by police in the same way that other folks have, warranting that we're all victims of that kind of violence. But there's this sense of, like, is this really who we are? We're going to re-elect a leader that has acted in these ways under these conditions. I mean, the fact that this is even a close election should be scary for
Absolutely.
A leader who is himself infecting other people. I mean, it's just shocking to me that this is even a concern, that this is even a question.
But the fact that people are saying it's the most important election, great.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't be apathetic. Not that voting is the way to engage in democracy or in activism, but it is a way, and we all need to be engaging with it if we're going to have
I don't know about you, but I've never seen such a huge push for voting ever in my life. It's celebrities, it's everywhere on TV. Instagram told me this morning that voting is the most is very trustworthy, and it never fails, basically.
Well, if Instagram says that, I'm sure.
If Instagram says it, it's. But they have such a huge reach, like, so people are constantly seeing this, and I've personally never seen such a huge push. It's almost becoming cool. Like, if you don't vote, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're not. It feels like life and death, because it is life and death. I was around, and I was the last time I felt really excited about voting. I vote every election, but the last time I felt excited about it was Obama's first term, when Obama first ran for president, because I felt that there was an energy that was sort of coming from. It was just brewed, right? And also we had a financial crisis that was just devastating on people's lives. And that felt like the most important one. But this one is actually, it's got the financial disaster, and it's also got a public health disaster. This is the most important one. And personally, I wish I had the candidates that I wanted, but there's a candidate I definitely don't want. And so
I think one of the big
I can't wait to vote. October 19th at FIU, I'm gonna go vote.
One of the big differences between Obama's first election and this one is there seemed to be some positive energy, at least in part of the country, around Obama's campaign.
Hopeful, that's right.
That, and putting aside some of the kind of tensions within that, I'm not sensing much positivity right now with this election. That there's more energy, or maybe a similar amount of energy, not to quantify it, but it feels like we're responding to some sort of, like ransom.
We are voting out of desperation, and that is a different feeling. I've never been in a election in which I feel like I'm voting out of desperation. And
so let me ask you this, because when Biden picked Kamala, as his VP, a lot of critiques came out.
That's what Trump.
Yeah.
That's what Trump.
He's called him Trump. Yeah. A lot of critiques came out regarding her past, as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these conversations came up about what is a good candidate, what is a good politician, a good president? Because y'all know me well enough. The way I see it, every president has blood on their hands. They're imperialist, and that's me. But how do we make sense of a president? Can there be such a thing as a good president, or maybe what does even good mean? Is this something that we should even be talking about, or I don't know.
Well, we should talk about it, whether or not it's possible or not. We shouldn't let some idea of what might be possible determine what we think about as possible. And like, we suffer from a crisis of imagination in general. So I think even as we might be having overwhelming evidence of the atrocities committed by our federal leaders, we still want to believe that there could be something else. So
my idea, there's no way for me to think of a good president outside of the conditions in which the person is a president, or someone has been a district attorney, a state district attorney, because I think that's what Kamala Harris was, right? She was a district attorney in San Francisco, and then she was a state attorney in California, which is such a massive bureaucracy that is probably second. I think it might be second in size to the U.S. Bureaucracy around justice. Anyway, so I would say that a president is good when there are certain conditions that allow someone to make decisions that we agree with, right? And so there are people who think Trump is good, because they believe that the white nationalists, they couldn't have had a better person, honestly. But they could have, and David Duke. But my point is that presidents are good because conditions are set up to allow them to do something. And if those conditions were equal in every moment, then we could judge the quality of a person's character. We could judge the quality of people's characters, but it is also to say that, for example, we could have had, let's say that you disagree with, you believe Trump should not be in office. If we had a working government and a working Congress, he would not be in office. So something is broken, of which Trump is an effect or a representation of it. And I think that is what is hard for me to answer about a good person, as if,
But I think that's
theory.
a great distinction, though, because that's something that a lot of people that I talk to have been thinking about. I've been thinking about, but I kind of like that it's hard to think of them as good outside of the conditions in which they're in.
Well, and additionally, if everyone's always bad, then no one's really guilty. That we have this sense that everyone's bad, everyone's corrupt, they're always going to do this. So then how do we hold people responsible if we expect the activities that they're doing?
That's right. Oh, and getting back to the first thing that we started talking about, the notion of the idea of having a candidate with no flaws as you understand a flaw, right? So it's, why do we believe that is a necessary condition? And so the thing for dealing with people whose flaws we know, this is the problem. Our system is broken, our Republican system is broken. That if we were educated enough and had been given the truth about people, we could set up structures to mitigate those flaws. And this is the problem, is that we don't have, we believe that in a kind of, I don't know, I'm not a leadership theory person, but the idea of the leadership is in the personality of the person, it is in the character of the person. When leadership is, to me, it can only be, you can only be a leader or a good leader or a bad leader only in a particular situation.
I think the difficulty comes when candidates misrepresent their history and their historical position. So this is one of the issues with vice president choice, where it's like, how can you have acted in the ways that you acted and so brazenly spoke about arresting parents for their truant kids, and then now articulate yourself in these ways? At least show that something has changed, that your thoughts have changed, acknowledge some, I don't want to say growth because that suggests some kind of value claim on that, but they just don't lie to us.
Or even in that
brazenly.
situation, a person can be guilty of truancy if there's a situation in which the schools are good places. I mean, maybe this is these decisions are always, the problem for truancy is that we have a reason for schooling that has nothing to do with the child
Or education.
or education. It has to do with the way of putting them. Right now, everybody's tired of having their kids be at home. So all of a
Part
sudden,
of that in particular, I think there were also fines that came along with that targeting poor people. most vulnerable populations.
Poor people are the only ones that get targeted for anything.
So I think that's part of what.
That's not a thing.
also-
Yes, and the frustration is reasonable. I think our political climate doesn't seem to allow for people to acknowledge past errors or mistakes, so they have to do
But
so
you
in
can change
such.
your mind.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. A good president changes their mind based on the fact that it's an
Right.
impossible job, and you get in that position. It's like the stuff I thought I was going to be able to do, I
Yeah.
can't do, or
And what's wild to me too is that it's like people will come out, and I would love to hear what you think, and they'll apologize. I'm sorry for writing the crime bill, but people are still in prison. Like actual people suffered and continue to suffer because of their actions have extreme consequences.
But
So
we should-
it's
we should-
hard.
but we
to-
should start with the apology. The apology is important for moral reasons, and allows us to say that at least you're understanding that you did something wrong.
but then what?
But then what?
That's the start. And then what are you going to do with that information, right? What are you going to do with the fact that you now feel bad about it?
And when you can do something about it.
when you can.
And that's where I
always
think in
when
our
you can.
general politics, we have discursive or representative victories while material conditions just stay the same.
Yeah.
And the more that we, I
Yeah.
think, understand victories in terms of, and not that the discursive, the narrative isn't important, but it can't be
Right.
the goal.
But there is something important about the apology.
So, if I'm being completely honest, I'm still thinking through the idea of the apology. I've watched this episode numerous times. I've listened to what my professors had to say. I try to think back to what I was thinking in that moment on the episode. And if I'm being honest, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with all this. Even if a politician apologizes, and even if they try to rectify the situation, is that even possible? Let's say someone was wrongfully imprisoned for decades. They let them out, they apologize to them, and they, I don't know, give them an amount of money or something. How does that make up for all the years that you were wrongfully imprisoned, for the abuse that you endured? How does that rectify the time that you spent away from your family, from your loved ones, from your friends? I just don't know. Like, I don't even know if it's possible to rectify a situation. I would love to hear what y'all think, because I'm still thinking through this. I'm still a little uncomfortable with all this. Yes, apologies are important. Yes, we should try to rectify situations. But is that even possible in certain situations? Well, I guess those are my thoughts. But let's also tune back in. Let's see what my professors wanted us to get out of the episode.
Oh, vote.
Vote.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
good
That
one.
all
That's a good one.
all the frustrations that we have need to be channeled into some kind of activity, but don't only vote. Let's not think that even if we do elect a different candidate as president, we still have these structural changes that we need to be addressing.
Absolutely.
And one of the concerns is we're going to view defeating Trump as the goal, and then be able to be satiated, look at what we've done, we're the country that we want, never mind the abject poverty, the economic crisis that we have, the continued health crises that we have.
Absolutely.
I was going to add that we're seeing Trump is being narrated as an existential threat to democracy and to Republicans' party. He is not the existential threat. He is the effect of decades-long undermining of Republican institutions, not Republicanism, the Republican Party, Republicanism. And because it's the only democracy that we have. And so this has been decades-long undermining of it, and creating a system of very few haves and mostly have-nots. And I think if you get anything out of it, is yes, go vote, but more, let's try to fix and attend to candidates that are going to try to fix the broken Republican systems that we have.
And one quick thing, and that happens locally. I think the
Absolutely.
more involved we are
Absolutely.
in our communities that are increasingly gentrified by people like me moving down into this area, that we all have a responsibility to be engaged with our
Yes.
local spaces.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of this episode and episodes to come. A Wiser Web, who developed our website, Ispeak Video, who's producing all these episodes, all the volunteers, the countless people that have donated to Woke Wednesdays. We would not be here without you. I am extremely excited and just honored and humbled to have everyone here, and especially my professors as well. Thank you so much for being here today, and wear a mask, wash your hands,
Please wear a mask,
sanitize.
wash your hands.
And stay woke. Yeah.
Stay, stay woke, vote. Woke, vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.